I have 10 tips for embroidering on placemats or anything that is kind of difficult to hoop and not your normal fabric project. Hi, I'm Sara from sewingmastery.com, and I got inspired the other day to actually embroider on some placemats. So I had found these cute little sayings. It's an OESD collection, handcrafted monograms, but it's not just about the letters that came with this, but there was some fabulous sayings. And for a couple months now, I have been picturing how to use them, and I decided that some placemats in a new kitchen would be just what I want to put them on. They're very inspirational, but there are things that we need to know of how to actually embroider on something that is not hoopable, which stabilizer we should use, and what are those things along the way to be prepared for. So I am also the instructor of our Embroidery Essentials online course. So some of our quilts behind me are the same concept, that if you are a new embroiderer, that this might be a place to start, because once you actually complete this course, something like an odd project like what I have in mind to show you today is actually not going to be so scary, because number one, you're going to be familiar with your machine. Number two, you'll have actually done 15 different embroidery techniques and used a variety of stabilizers that might be new for you. So if you would like to join me and over 1,000 students in our course, they have all mastered their machines with this 5.5 hour long course. You get to keep it for life, and at any given time, if you've got embroidery questions, you can email me or ask our group of students that have graduated from this class your questions and get started. So these placemats and tips are going to be helpful no matter which brand of embroidery machine you have. So just keep that in mind. We're going to go through 10 different things that I have found are things that you will need to know. Plus, after I tell you the tips, I'm going to actually stitch out my fourth and final placemat. So I'm going to start by going through and talking about where I started. So first off, I decided that I needed a stabilizer that would wash away on the back. I didn't really want stabilizer to be on the back of the placemats, because not that I'm going to use the back side up, but I just didn't want that extra stabilizer to show. But a tearaway stabilizer could be an option for you. I chose a water-soluble stabilizer that was actually sticky. So I'll be showing you how to hoop this specialty stabilizer. Next, all the things that I'm talking about will be linked in the description below. So if you need to reference stabilizers or supplies that I am suggesting, just check out everything below in the description of this YouTube channel. Plus, after everything is ready to embroider, before I get started, a lot of fabric that would probably be used for placemats is going to be textured, kind of rough or bumpy, and I will be taking another piece of water-soluble stabilizer, almost like a film, that will go over the top, and then that will completely make sure the stitches don't get sunk into the texture of the fabric. So these tips are going to be good whenever you have something that you can't hoop. So other things that could be hard to hoop could be like velvet, could be a collar, a cuff, a hat, some gloves, a scarf, all types of things out there that you can buy ready-made that you can add embroidery to. Even a stocking. Sometimes so much easier to just buy a stocking pre-made and then add the name to the top. Now, once we actually get started, and after we hoop our stabilizer, one way to really make sure that the placemat doesn't move around, have your machine do what's called a basting in the hoop feature. This will allow the fabric to be secure to the stabilizer, and you won't have to worry about it moving around, even though it's not actually being hooped. Let's talk needles next. I am a fan of an embroidery needle, number one, because it's sharp, and also a little larger size. So like a size 90/14 embroidery needle is really going to help as it's working through all types of thicknesses of placemats or in the hoop projects that you are working on. So just make sure that you actually change that needle often, especially as you can see, there's a lot of stitches in this. I believe I actually did 2 placemats and then actually put in a new needle. Because I need these to turn out, I don't want to have to do another one, is that I want to make sure the quality is there. I put a new needle in. If your machine has a straight stitch throat plate, once you put that on, and then also make sure it's cleaned out before you start this kind of heavy duty project. I did choose to match my bobbin thread to the back of the fabric, so I do have kind of a navy blue bobbin thread in. Not that that's actually as noticeable because my white thread from the top is pulled to the back side. But what I am doing is just making sure that for any reason a little bobbin thread came up, it would actually just blend in to the fabric. Now, I could also match my thread color. So obviously with a white design like I chose to do, this is actually, I could have done a white bobbin. I went ahead and decided to put in a navy blue bobbin. Now, if you're worried about doing this for the first time, my next tip is actually to buy an extra placemat or 2. So then that way you could test it and see that you have the right stabilizer and setup of your machine and not worry about it. Or just in case one doesn't turn out, you always have that backup. And usually the case is, if you have a backup or plan B, you usually don't need to actually use it. If you are a newer embroiderer, I do recommend that you test your design. Even if it's not on an actual placemat, testing the design on a similar fabric or just enough to test the colors that you chose to use and make sure that they are going to look good on the fabric. So many times with an odd color, a red or an orange, and you do the design and there's an area that just kind of doesn't pop as much. Doing that test design, it's really going to make sure that it's going to look the best from the beginning. Now, another thing you can do if you have software, which I do, is I went ahead and brought the design into my software and turned my background navy blue. And then that way I could see that it really is going to look as I think it should look on screen before I stitch it out. I have 3 more tips for you before we get started in actually embroidering from start to finish my final placemat. So I did mention earlier about using a straight stitch throat plate. If you have not gotten in the habit of putting your straight stitch throat plate on, I highly recommend it. It will definitely make sure to give you that perfect stitch every single time. Most machines, if you don't have that or didn't come with your machine, most companies do provide or have that available for purchase for most models. There are some models out there that they do not make that particular stitch plate for, but might as well check and see if one is available for you. This next tip will actually just save you stabilizer. You know, when you open a design, the design will usually come in and your machine will show you which hoop that design fits in. Do you know that that is the recommended hoop size? And if you're just used to always using a certain size of hoop, you might be wasting stabilizer more than you realize. So I always say, look at what the machine tells you, follow the recommendation for the hoop it will fit in, and then go ahead and follow and do and use that hoop. You will always get a better quality design when it is in the hoop size it fits in. And the last thing I want to talk about is how do you actually remove the stabilizer, especially the water-soluble stabilizer, after the design is done. So I'm going to go ahead and just slip this last placement out of the hoop. You see that the film is on here, my basting stitches are still in place, and that you can kind of see the stabilizer where the sticky part is in the middle. That was where I was able to lay the placemat and hold it in place. And I'm going to teach you how to score the stabilizer to the shape of your hoop in just a second. So first off, you do want to take scissors and remove as much of this bulk as possible from the front and the back. Now, one thing to always do, just so you don't accidentally snip into your fabric, is always place the project between the stabilizer and your body. That way, as you're cutting, you can always see this piece. If you do it the opposite way, as you're cutting, you are kind of blind snipping back here, and there is a chance that you might actually snip into it. That's not good. You've done all this work. Let's make sure it's saved all the way to the end. Next, what I was doing with these first two placemats is just taking and running some nice warm to hot water over the water-soluble stabilizer, and it just dissolves into the sink. Doesn't bother the sink at all, but it will definitely just go ahead and dissolve. You can let it just sit for a little bit and then kind of give it some kind of swishing around, and that will also make it just disappear. I love the way it looks on the front, and it looks almost as neat on the back. So if any of these tips have been helpful for you, make sure that you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and tell me in the comments which of those tips will be most helpful for you. So let's get started in hooping our stabilizer. Aren't these turning out so pretty? This one says, be silly, be honest, be kind. This one says, everything happens for a reason. That was so pretty to stitch out. This one, even though it still has a stabilizer in there, it says, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And that was actually an Eleanor Roosevelt quote there. And it's actually kind of, her name's written at the bottom. So let's talk about the stabilizer. So first off, the water-soluble stabilizer that is with the sticky option is just going to come off the roll, and it's going to feel kind of textured on this side and shiny on this side. So number one, it's also very stiff, and so when you are working with it, the natural way that people want to put this in the hoop is like this, because that's the way it's curled. But tell you the truth, what we actually need is to flip it over, and the shiny side needs to be pointed up. So go ahead and you do have to kind of crease it back in there, and just go ahead and be the boss of this particular stabilizer. Get it to all kind of squish in there, and then tighten your hoop up. I'm going to just make sure that all my edges are pushed in as far as they're supposed to be pushed in. And I can feel we are ready to show you how to remove the sticker that will expose the sticky part of this stabilizer. You need something a little bit sharp, a point of some scissors, a pin, or maybe the tip of your seam ripper. And then just take the point, and you're going to just gently push in and go all the way around the perimeter of your hoop. You're kind of scoring that edge there. And then you're going to take and kind of get it to lift up just a little bit. So once it lifts up, you'll be able to peel this all the way away. Now that stabilizer is ready to have our fabric placed over it. Since these designs aren't really like symmetrical, I really just need to find the center of the placemat. I'm going to go ahead and fold it in half, and then fold it in half again. And I'm just going to give that little corner a little crease. That will be close enough. You definitely could mark it with a fabric marker and do a vertical and horizontal. Now I don't want to put this on just yet, because I'm going to show you a trick that if you pull in your design and let it be in the center of the hoop, you can just bring the placemat to the center point, and then it will be all ready to stitch. Remember, it really doesn't matter which brand of embroidery machine you own. All these tips will relate to all embroidery machines out there. So for example, as I bring up my design that I'm about ready to stitch, the needle is way up here. This is like where the first stitch is going to be taken, and is not the center of my design. So the first thing that I want to do is move the needle to the center of my hoop. At this point, I can take my placemat and bring it over to the location that the needle is sitting. And I really can just eyeball that this is really all nice and straight in the hoop. So I'm going to just kind of stick the placemat down in place and then remove that pin before I start to stitch. Remember I talked about a basting in the hoop function? This one is positioned right here where it will move over and then start to stitch a basting box all the way around my design. I've placed a layer of the water-soluble stabilizer on the top so it can actually be also caught in the basting box so it's all held together. Since I am stitching this all in one color, I'm going to go ahead and touch the monochrome function button so it will actually stitch all the colors in one straight pass without any stopping in between.